Hello there. Dr. Bill Crawford here, psychologist, speaker, author of 8 books, host of 2 PBS specials. Here again to bring you another tip on how to help you create the life you want. Specifically, how to use my life from the top of the mind philosophy to bring more clarity, confidence, creativity into everything you do. Today, I want to talk about the concept of honesty and maybe the question, when is honesty not the best policy? This, by the way, comes from kind of inspired by Brené Brown's book, Dare to Lead. It's one of the books that you kind of dog-ear almost every page and underline everything. And there's a whole series of concepts that I found valuable I want to bring to videos. This is one of them. And the concept says, okay, honesty is not the best policy when it's driven by frustration, resentment, hurt, or anger, because it's very likely to trigger frustration, resentment, hurt, and anger in others, and actually get in the way of what we want to communicate. I mean, have you ever heard anybody say, well, hey, I'm just being honest with you. I'm just telling you like it is. I'm just giving you the facts. And what that implies is, okay, this particular message, even though it may sound hurtful or critical, is okay now, and you should accept it because it's just honest. And there's that whole concept of brutal honesty, in my humble opinion, that's an oxymoron. So what we want to do when we're communicating with people is make sure that, number one, we are coming from the best of who we are, not this hurt, frustrated, angry, resentful part of who we are. There's a new science out there called interpersonal neurobiology. Interpersonal neurobiology. And it speaks to how one brain affects another brain. And for those of you who follow my life from the top of the mind philosophy, you know how the brain interprets data is really what my philosophy is based on. So rather than getting into all the complexity of the brain, basically let's look at it in 3 parts. What I call the top of the mind, the neocortex, the upper 80% of the brain. This is where we have access to our clarity, confidence, creativity, compassion. This is where we make our best purposeful choices. Middle brain is called the limbic system. Lower brain is the brainstem. So how this works is data first comes into us through our eyes and ears, and just any thought that happens to pop into our head, and it is first scanned by the middle brain, the limbic system, and the middle brain has a bias to the negative because it's kept us alive all of these years that we've been on the planet by keeping us worried and anxious and maybe even angry. So it has a tendency to believe that if we're not worried or anxious or angry, we're not safe, because that was the case maybe back in our evolution. Unfortunately, what it has a tendency to do is to misinterpret situations as dangerous, throw us into the part of the brain that's designed to deal with danger. This is that lower brain, the brainstem. This is where we trigger certain chemicals like adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol, and where we get angry, stressed, frustrated. And if we are trying to talk to someone from this lower brain where we're driven by that anger, frustration, resentment, hurt, whatever, chances are what we're going to say is not going to be heard as valuable. It's going to be heard as critical. And as such, it will be rejected, or it will drive this other person into their lower brain. I call that banging brainstems. They're in theirs, we're in ours. Nobody's really listening to anybody. It's a debate about who's right, and no real communication happens. So what we want to avoid is talking to people basically about this, well, I'm just being honest, thinking that somehow that makes the communication good or all right or effective. It actually gets in the way of us being effective with others. What we want to do is to be very clear that, all right, I want to be coming from clarity and confidence, creativity and compassion. I want to make sure that I'm framing what I have to say to this person in a way that they will hear as valuable. In order to do that, I've got to know what's important to them and how what's important to them really fits with what's important to me. When I can combine that, now I can frame communication in a way that they are likely to hear as valuable, which is really, isn't that the idea of all of our communication? We want to be heard, we want to be understood. And when we are coming from this upper 80% of the brain and the best of who we are versus this lower 20% of the brain, the worst of who we are, we're much more likely to get our ideas across. This is what I teach. I have a system, again, called Life from the Top of the Mind, that I go around the world teaching. It shows us how to shift from this reactive brain to the more proactive brain so that we're more purposeful in what we say. It also helps us change the chemical makeup of our brain and body from adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol, the lower brain, to serotonin and endorphins and dopamine, the upper brain, which has us feeling better and thinking clearer. Then part 2 of my system is, okay, now that we know how to get to the top of the mind, how do we stay there? How do we rewire the brain so we don't get triggered as much by difficult people, difficult situations in the first place? Then part 3 of the system is, all right, now that I know how to get to the top of the mind and how to stay there, how to rewire the brain so I'm coming from this upper 80% of the brain, how do I frame my communications with others, especially those people who are stuck in this lower brain? How do I engage them in such a way that they shift from the resistant brain to the receptive brain so we can create true solution-focused conversations? Is this something you would like for you or your organization? All you got to do is go to my website, billcrawfordphd.com, hit the contact button, let me know what you're interested in, and I would love to talk with you about that. In the meantime, here's to you, not just being honest because there it is, but being truthful in a way that has what you're wanting to communicate really getting across and engaging that other person in the way where they hear it as valuable. Here's to you bringing more clarity, confidence, creativity into everything you do. I look forward to seeing you in the future.